Hi and welcome to MOCAT. In this video, I'm going to tell you all about the NMAT exam. What is the structure, the format, what are the expected cutoffs, the B schools that accept the NMAT score, and we'll also delve into some of the test taking strategies that you can utilize, really important given that the structure and format of NMAT is pretty different from CAT and some of the other entrance tests. So let's get right into it. Now to start with, let's learn a little bit more about the NMAT exam itself. Now the test format is very different, like I was saying. It's almost like the GMAT format. Here we have 3 sections, and in every section all the questions are compulsory in the sense that you need to answer a question and only then can you move to the next option. And you can't come back to another question even if you feel that, oh, I've made a silly mistake or something. There's no back button, you don't have a question paper palette or anything. You solve one question, then you go to the next question. Each question will have 5 options. Now because they're making us solve every question, there are no negative marks. But what does happen is, in case if you start getting a few questions right, you'll find that the next few questions become a little more difficult and progressively more difficult, and every question will have a different mark. So it can be 3 marks or 4 marks and 5 marks depending on the difficulty of the question. Now should you get some of the answers wrong, again what will happen is you'll start getting easier questions. So the test itself is what is called adaptive. It will adapt to your performance, and so different people will end up seeing different questions depending on whether they are getting the questions right or wrong. The unique thing in NMAT is you can choose the sequence of your sections. So we have 3 sections: language skills, quantitative skills and logical reasoning. We will have 36 questions in all 3 sections, but the time that you have are different. We've listed out the time out here on the screen, and as you can see, you have less than a minute for the questions in the language skills, whereas you have considerable more time in the quant section. So that's how it is, and I definitely do recommend that you take the official NMAT by GMAT test to get a much better idea in case you haven't yet. Now another unique thing about this exam is generally held anytime from 70 to 90 days. This year, for example, we've been taking the test from 10th October and you can take it all the way up to the 19th of December. I personally took the test on 15th October. You can choose your own date, and you can also choose if you're going to take it at a test center in your city or you want to take the test at home. It will be a proctored test if you take it at home, which means that you're going to have your video on and someone's going to monitor you while you're taking the test. Now, if you're living in a place where there is no test center and you can't get to a place like that, then you don't have any option other than taking it at home. Otherwise, I would definitely recommend that you take it at a test center, purely because the format of taking it at home, there could be internet issues, but more importantly, because you'll have your camera on, the other person will also have their video and audio on, there could be a bit of disturbance. So it's always better to take it in a test center if that is possible. You can take up to 2 retakes, but it's important to remember that any of the NMIMS institutes as well as some of the other institutes which accept the NMAT score will only take your first test. But there are some institutes which will take the best of 2 or best of 3 depending on how many tests you take it. So on that note, let's look at what are the B schools that accept the NMAT score. Now NMIMS, of course, all the NMIMS institutes starting with NMIMS Mumbai, which is their primary campus, they will accept your NMAT score. KJ Somaya in Bombay is another institute. These 2 institutes, or rather all of these institutes, will only take the first test score. There are also a bunch of other institutes. We've mentioned some of the important ones out here. So again, these are institutes that if you're looking to apply, you can get more details in MOCAT in the info zone section, and you can also independently check wherever you have an institute which is accepting the best of 3 scores. If you're looking for that institute, then this is something that you can keep in mind. So now that we've learned these facts, let's get more into what is the syllabus and what are the expected cutoffs. So the sections, as we've discussed, they're language skills, quantitative skills and logical reasoning. I'm not getting deep into the syllabus. In language skills, we'll also have vocabulary and grammar, which are not there in CAT. Quantitative skills is similar to CAT. Logical reasoning will be split into two parts, verbal reasoning and analytical reasoning. If you want to get more of an understanding of these sections, you can log on to mockcat.com and hit the info zone section. You have a lot of details, including the syllabus out there. Now, another unique thing, and this is the last unique thing that we have in NMAT, is that we'll get the scores immediately. The moment you're done with the exam, you'll get to know your scores in each section, and you'll also get to know the total scores, right? So, and this is also something which you'll get in your dashboard in the NMAT website. Now, what we'll get later, once the entire test period is done, is what are the cutoffs. So, the NMIMS institutes, they don't look at it from the perspective of percentile. They'll just tell you what is the minimum score that is needed for NMIMS Bombay, what is the minimum score for NMIMS Bangalore, and so on. Every institute will have their minimum for the total marks as well as the minimum marks that you need to score in each section. Now, last year, for example, for NMIMS Bombay, the total marks which were required were 232 or higher, and the total marks in each section again were in 70s. Now this year, from what we have seen having taken it, and from some of our students having taken it, the exam does seem a tad tougher than last year. For example, last year I had got 111 in the language skills section, which is what I coach, and this year I just got 99. Quant again similarly was slightly tougher than last year. So again, what we are expecting is that the total mark cutoff should be 230 or just a little bit above that, and the sectional cutoffs again should be in the 70s. Now this again is for NMIMS Bombay. The other institutes will reduce their cutoffs a little bit, and every other institute which accepts the NMAT score will also come up with their own cutoffs, right? But this is something which you should target. And what I would recommend again is take the official NMAT by GMAT test, see how you're scoring, and then take a look at each individual section to see which sections you could score more to boost your overall mark, and wherever you're not making the sectional cutoffs, let's say you're not getting 70 or a little more, see how you can boost it. The next slide we're going to get deep into the strategy bit, but the score in NMAT is something which is really important, because the weightage given to the NMAT score in your selection is extremely high. It's 70%, which is something which is higher than most other institutes. So let's get into how you can actually get these marks. So we'll talk about 3 different ways in which you can improve your score. The first thing to start with, of course, would be to go and take the official NMAT by GMAT mock, get a sense of how much you're scoring. So when it comes to the strategy of how you can get as high a score as possible, there are 3 things that you should focus on. The first is the sequence of sections. Since that is something which we can choose in the beginning of the test, I would suggest that this is something which you choose based on your strengths. What I do recommend is that you start with the language skills. It's similar to CAT, right, where we are starting with the VARC section. So here again, you could start with that. It's 28 minutes and it's done. And since it's a 2-hour paper, if you start with quant or LR and subsequently you get to the language skills, it could be that you're a little tired of reading. So it makes more sense. And you'll also get a high when 28 minutes are done and you're done with one section. I generally start with that. Again, that's my strength. So I like to make sure that I take it when I'm the freshest. Now there's usually 2 ways of sequencing which work for people. Either you take exactly what comes in CAT, which is you're starting with language skills, then going into LR, and then ending it in quantitative skills. I do recommend a slightly different strategy. You can start with language skills and then go to quant. That's 52 minutes. So, language skills has sort of been a warm-up for you, and then you get into the quant section. You try and maximize as much as you can do, and then again you're back in the LR section. The other thing which happens with this is you split it into reading, calculating, arithmetic, and then reading again. So instead of doing LS, LR and quant, if you do LS, quant and then LR, your mind has sort of also had a break, simply because you are using different skill sets in different times in the exam. Play with it. I always recommend that you also take the extra mocks that GMAT provides. It's an adaptive test. I have not known any other website which actually has got the adaptive bit right, so it makes more sense to go for the official mock. So if you take the extra couple of mocks, you'll be able to try different approaches and see what works for you. But definitely make sure to focus on this as one of the things. Now the next thing which you need to look at is finishing every section. While there are no negative marks in NMAT, what many students don't realize is you have to get to the end of the paper, otherwise there can be a penalty. So this means that if you're not able to finish the section in the time limit, which is entirely possible, right? In verbal, we are getting 28 minutes for 36 questions, which means that we are getting less than 1 minute per question, and this is with 2 RCs. Thankfully, this year they've reduced the number of RCs from 3 to 2. So it has given us a little bit extra time. But still, for every section, typically you might not finish all the questions. So how do we manage to get to the end of the section, given that we'll not be able to get to the next question till we answer? So of course, you need to skip some questions. Now, when it comes to skipping questions, there are 2 ways in which you can do it. One is the questions which you find difficult or which you feel are going to take a little extra time. So let's say you're a little slow in reading, then perhaps you don't want to do the second RC. You can just click BBBB or CCCC, whatever it is, and move on. Similarly, in quant, if there are some questions which you feel that this is an area which you're weaker in, or perhaps this is a question where there's a lot of arithmetic which is needed, and you feel that this is going to take you more time than certain other questions would, those are probably the questions that you can skip. And by skip, what I mean is you just mark some option, right? A, B, C, D, whatever. Pick one option in mind, and whichever questions you're skipping, just select that. So it can be A or B or C, D, E, it doesn't matter, but just go with one so that at least some of them are going to be right. Don't go for like A, B, C, D, E, or don't spend a little bit of time in trying to figure it out. I've seen students where in the mock what they do is for jumbled paragraph questions, they'll try to figure out what is the first sentence and then they'll choose an option which has that. Don't go with that. If you're skipping a question, entirely skip it. There'll be many more questions and you're not going to get any negative marks for this. You just get an easier question. This is the approach which I personally take. For example, when it comes to LR, the input-output cases, these are the ones which, if I'm taking LR towards the end, I feel that this is probably the one which I could skip. It could be time-taking. It is also not my strength because I sometimes do make silly mistakes and, I might end up making a mistake. So I've actually skipped input-output cases. These are 2 cases of 4 questions each, and, it's come to 8 questions in total. And at the end of it, I remember last time I still got 269. This time I got 279, and those are well above the cutoff. So that's something which still worked. But I do prefer the strategy that Vignesh goes with, which is skipping alternate questions. Now this makes more sense because if you're skipping a bunch of questions at a time, what is happening is that the chances that you're getting multiple questions wrong is of course higher. If I'm avoiding one RC or one input output case, for example, 4 questions, even if I'm going with BBBB or CCCC, since there are 5 options, at max I'm probably getting maybe 1 question right. So the way the adaptive exam would work, I would start getting easier questions and I'd get them right, but I'd end up getting only 3 marks for those questions instead of 4 or 5 marks. So he skips alternate questions. So let's say half the section is done or half your time is done and you realize that you have a lot more to do. That's where you could start skipping alternate questions. So you're solving one, hopefully getting it right, and then skipping the next one quickly. And because you've just got maybe 1 question wrong, it will not come down to the easiest of questions. And he's got 290 in this NMAT. So it's definitely a strategy which works. So that's probably what I would recommend for you as well. Now the last thing is, what do you prep for? Now, given that CAT's just gotten over and along with NMAT, hopefully you're giving a whole bunch of other exams like SNAP and ZAT and maybe IFT also. So you need to prioritize your prep accordingly, especially if you're taking ZAT, because you do need to prep for decision making over there. So here in NMAT, what you can do is, I would suggest you focus more on your test taking strategy. We've discussed a lot of these, and the test itself is something which is also a different format. So it makes more sense to at least take 4 to 5 tests, definitely all the official mocks that you can take. The prep that you should do should be for LR. This is an important section. This is very different again from what comes in most exams. These are singlet questions, analytical reasoning and verbal reasoning. So here again you can do two things. One is make sure to prep as much as possible. I'll put a few recommended sources in the description so you can go through that. And at the same time, you can also figure out what is your strength. Is it VR or AR or both? Why that's important is because the questions will be mixed up. So in that case, if for example VR is your strength, then certain AR questions are the ones that you could look to skip, or vice versa, right? All depends on what are your strengths and your weaknesses. Be ready with those before the exam itself, so you know which questions to attempt and which to skip, because getting to the end of the paper is the most important thing. So that's largely it for the strategy. And do put your questions in the chat. If you have any doubts, any questions, we'll look at it and we'll help you. 3 key takeaways that you can take from this video are: in NMAT, your test strategy is extremely important to ensure that you get as high a score as possible, because the score itself is really important for you to get selected into NMIMS institutes. The second important takeaway would be, if you're looking at B schools which allow multiple options like IFMR for example, have that option open. Once you've taken a test, if you feel that you're not getting the score which would be required for that B school, or you just maybe just about getting it, you can look to take another attempt and increase your score so that you're comfortably getting the shortlist. And the last thing is, the LR section can actually boost your score a lot. So make sure that you take the time to prep for that. The other sections other than grammar and vocabulary would largely be similar to CAT, and it would be at an easier level than CAT. So if you've done your preparation for CAT, just the LR section would be sufficient. So preparation in terms of knowing the different question types, the concepts, how to solve them, and which questions to go for and which questions to skip are the things which you should look at. So all the best from me and all of us at MockCat for NMAT and all of the other exams which you're taking. We are going to come out with a series of videos on the strategy that you should go for different exams. So please do consider subscribing. Put any questions that you have in the chat or any more content that you want us to post, and we'll be putting that up as well. All the best.